Hi again. Okay, this time we're going to talk about some extremely common patterns you're going to see in symbolizing sentences in FOL. In particular, the combination of a universal quantifier with a conditional, combination, on the other hand, of an existential quantifier with a conjunction. Those are definitely not the only combinations of quantifier and connective that are allowed. You can make a sentence of FOL that has practically any combination you like, but quite a lot of very natural sounding English sentences are going to be best symbolized using these combinations. So any sentence of the form all mammals are warm-blooded is going to wind up looking like for all X, if X is a mammal, then X is warm-blooded. We talked about that a bit at the end of the last video. But in general, this is the pattern you'll see. For a sentence like all F's are G's, or a sentence like every F is a G, whatever F and G might be, any one place predicate, you're going to wind up with a symbolization that looks like this. For all X, if X is an F, then X is a G. That's just a pattern worth getting used to. Now, it's important to keep in mind the two combinations I'm telling you about here. Universal quantifier usually, although not always, usually goes with a conditional. Existential quantifier, I'll talk about in a second, almost always goes with a conjunction. You can have a sentence that has a universal quantifier with a conjunction, but that's going to say something different. So if I write for all X, X is an F, and X is a G, this doesn't say all the F's are G's. It doesn't say all mammals are warm-blooded. It says everything is an F and a G. So if I had mammals and warm-blooded, I'd be saying everything is a mammal and everything is warm-blooded. That's a much stronger claim than just saying all mammals are warm-blooded, right? According to that claim, all mammals are warm-blooded. There might be other things, right? Reptiles, they're reptiles. They are not warm-blooded. That's fine. But this one, if I use a universal quantifier with a conjunction, then I wind up saying everything's a mammal and everything's warm-blooded. I'm not just saying all mammals are warm-blooded, but everything else is warm-blooded too, and also there isn't anything else. Everything's a mammal. Think about it this way. A universal quantifier is saying something pretty strong. It's saying no matter what you put in the X gap, you're going to get a true sentence. An arrow sentence is a way of weakening that strong claim. So an arrow sentence, the arrow connective, winds up giving you lots of ways to make the sentence true. So remember from TFL, when we have a sentence like A arrow B, there are 3 different lines in the truth table where that comes out true. You might have A true, B true. You might have A false, B true. You might have A false, B false. The only thing you're not allowed to have is true arrow false. So when I say for all X, Fx arrow Gx, I'm saying no matter which thing you take, either it's both a mammal and warm-blooded, or it's not a mammal and it's still warm-blooded, or it's not a mammal and it's not warm-blooded. By contrast, if you think about the truth table for and, there's only one line of the truth table where that's true. You have to have both sides true. So if I say for all X, X is warm-blooded and X is a mammal, then I'm saying no matter what you take, the and sentence is true. So no matter what you take, it's a mammal and it's warm-blooded. That's a much stronger thing. You can say it in English. You can say it with a sentence like this. But it's something stronger than saying all, not all things, but just all mammals are warm-blooded. Then you're universal quantifier with an arrow, and that is a much more common pattern. Let me just take away those things and come back to, here's the common pattern. Okay. Here's the other very common pattern you're going to run into. When you want to say some F's are G's, usually the existential is going to go with a conjunction, the existential quantifier with a conjunction. And it's for the opposite reason. So I said, with a universal sentence, the universal quantifier is already doing something very strong. You're saying something about everybody. You want the arrow to weaken the thing you're saying about everybody, to make it more often true. An existential quantifier, on the other hand, already says something very weak. It just says, there's at least one person I can substitute in for the X gap to make a true sentence. I don't know who, just somebody. There's somebody who's a head of state and is obnoxious. So if the existential is already pretty weak, we probably want something stronger inside the brackets in order to wind up saying something. Okay. So usually that's going to be an and. Okay. So if I write something like this, right, something like there exists an X such that X is an F and X is a G, that says some F is a G. If I say there exists an X who's a head of state and is obnoxious, I'm saying some head of state is obnoxious. It's worth noting, in our language in FOL, generally speaking, the difference between the singular some F and the plural some Fs doesn't amount to much. Usually, if you get something like some heads of state are obnoxious, I think that's going to be true even if there's only one out there. So this existential quantifier says there's at least one thing like this. You haven't got the resources yet, depending on, I guess, on what order you're watching these videos in, but if you just have names, predicates, and quantifiers, you don't have the resources yet to say there are two of anything. That'll be the next video, or the last one. I guess you can watch these in any order. Okay. Generally speaking, what I want to say is don't pay too much attention to plurals here, unless you have a sentence that specifically says, like, there are at least two obnoxious heads of state. In another video, we can talk about how to symbolize that, but typically, there exists an X such that Fx and Gx. That's a way of saying some F is G, or some F's are G's. Now, this pattern, the commonness of this pattern, existential quantifier with a conjunction, that's even stronger. There's an even stronger correlation than between the universal and the conditional. Okay, when I broke that pattern before with the universal and I wrote for all x, fx, and gx, I was able to tell you pretty straightforwardly in English what that would sound like, right? It says, instead of all mammals are warm-blooded, it says everything's a mammal and is warm-blooded. I hope the mic can't pick up my stomach growling. I should go eat something. But on the other hand, if I break the pattern with the existential, I'm not even sure what it says at that point. If I write something like, there exists an x such that if fx, then gx. If x is an f, then f is a g. I'm not even sure how to say that in English. My best attempt would be to say, okay, let's do some fancy footwork here. Here's a fact from TFL that you might be aware of. Whenever you have a sentence like A arrow B, that's equivalent. That has the same truth table as the sentence not A or B. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this thing. So I'm telling you there exists an x such that if fx then gx, that means the same thing as there exists an x such that either x is not an f or x is a g. So if I try to say that in English, that comes out as someone is either not a sorry, our example for the existential was heads of state are obnoxious. So if I put head of state in for F and obnoxious root, so someone is either not a head of state or is obnoxious. Yeah, very confusing. I think I can almost guarantee that if you're just symbolizing sentences that I ask you to symbolize in FOL for this class, you're never going to use an existential with an or. Oh, that sounds too strong. Maybe I don't think that. It's totally possible. I'm not going to tell you it's impossible to have an English sentence that uses this combination, but if you do your best to symbolize an English sentence and you wind up writing an existential with an or, my advice is to slap yourself, look again. If it still looks like an or, maybe repeat the process 1 or 2 more times. If it still looks like an or, then go with it. You might be right. But most of the time, you're going to have something more like this, an existential with a conjunction, with an and. Okay. These kinds of patterns are going to serve you extremely well. You're going to run into lots of sentences in English that I ask you to symbolize in FOL that you can rephrase as another English sentence that you'll be able to tell means the same thing and is in the form every F is a G or some F is a G. That's a technique we're going to use repeatedly as you're symbolizing sentences in the rest of this class. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Those 2 patterns, learn them, use them, get some practice. Go do quizzes on question mark. I'll talk to you in a second about identity.